Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay, hi, and welcome to Criminals and Cocktails. I'm Chris, and I am your host for the evening.
I'm Greg, and I'm here for the drinks.
Hi, I'm Ellis. It's great to see you today.
And you're just here. Okay, so
I'm just here. I'm going to play that role today.
this case is one that I'm gonna bet most people watching or listening have not heard of.
Why is that?
Because this is a local case. It happened in Charlotte in 1990.
1990, what were you doing back then?
Working.
For the man?
Yeah, I was working for the man.
In 1990?
Making $3 an hour working for the man.
Wow, at age 50?
Oh, you're funny, your jokes. So this is one that's also a little close to my heart because it happened about a year and a half after I moved to Charlotte, and it happened in a really nice area. It's still a nice area of Charlotte that has wealth and professionals, showing it could happen anywhere.
So this is out of 4 criminals, this is the second one in Charlotte. So we're at 50% right now.
We are.
Yeah.
But the reason this is so interesting is we have new developments. So there's been new developments on this case that has been cold for 36 years. So that's why I want to bring this. Yeah,
I'm familiar with it.
So the victim's name, let's start with that. The victim's name is Kim Thomas Friedland. You'll hear her referred to, and I'll refer to as well, as Kim Thomas, because that was sort of her known name. Her married name was Friedland, but she's known as Kim Thomas. She was murdered on July 27th, 1990.
That was my birthday, and I had just turned... That was my
50?
birthday.
So...
He said 15.
Yeah. So what happened was her husband arrives home and calls 911 at 9:59 p.m.
That's how they all happen.
Yes. And...
Oh, let me guess. He came home and found her dead.
He did. He came home and found her dead, handcuffed, slashed to death in her dining room. Their infant child just feet away. That's what...
Was the infant alive? Okay.
The infant was okay.
Okay.
I managed to know. Yeah, rushed the police to my house. My wife has been killed. My refrigerator. My wife is at 3853 Coastal Road. Get to the house fast. The name for Freeland. Hurry it. It's an emergency on the ground. Just acting right now. My wife is dead on the floor. Come here fast. Yes, sir.
That was the call into 911. Now, let's talk a little bit about Kim Thomas first. She was a women's rights activist. She did a lot of work in Charlotte, a lot of work with the National Organization of Women. She was very well known, very well liked, very well respected. She was married to Dr. Ed Friedland. He was a pediatric specialist in Charlotte in the early 90s. That's the start of this long tale. Now, that was July 27th, 1990. And we're not going to know a lot more about who killed Kim Thomas for 36 years. But we'll get to that later.
But a lot of stuff did unfold during that time.
It did. And that's where this gets really, really interesting. So let's talk about what they walked into. So when the police arrived, they found Kim Thomas handcuffed in the dining room, slashed, blood all over the place, infant nearby.
And she was handcuffed to herself, not to a furniture. Okay.
The doctor was there. He said he had been at work and this is what he found when he came home. So the crime scene was extremely violent, but they found a number of pieces of evidence, including blood evidence. There was what appeared to be some sort of matter on the rug. It didn't say whether it was blood or something else. It may be semen. I don't know. And there were pubic hairs and all kinds of stuff.
Now, you said this crime scene was violent. It was really horrific because if I recall correctly, she was almost dismembered.
Yes. That's how bad. When I say she was slashed to death, that's how bad this was. Now,
I didn't hear you say the word violent, but...
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you say...
So that's where we start. Of course, the detectives then interview the husband, interview the neighbors, interview people in the neighborhood. They determined that there are a number of neighbors that note there was a person in the neighborhood. He was a known handyman whose name was Marion Gales, and he becomes a focal point early in the investigation.
Blame it on the black guy.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Well, they did investigate the husband too, but
We'll get into that in a second, because that in and of itself is a whole other case. But the witnesses say, yes, this guy was in the neighborhood. There was even somebody who reported seeing Marion Gales with blood on his shirt the day of the murder. So that's where we start the case. Now, this thing twists and turns, and I'm not going to sit there and go back to, oh, well, the police screwed up and the department of the police department screwed up. But, and we've talked about this before with the Taco Bell killer, Charlotte police in the early 90s, you know, we could talk about missteps, we could talk about being shorthanded, whatever we want to go. This one, I don't feel like was handled the best because they quickly focused on one person.
The husband.
The husband. Now,
yeah, I mean, okay, so set the scene. The husband comes home from work, and he's a doctor,
yes.
and his wife is handcuffed, almost dismembered, and found dead.
Yes.
So,
Oh, and there's no signs of forced entry.
right.
That's very
So
important.
let's be realistic. Most crimes like that, especially violent crimes, are generally from someone that you know or a loved one or something like that. And there was trouble in the marriage. There was
Not
reported
really.
trouble.
Not really. Nothing major. That,
Nothing
they
major,
had.
but I think they did. Some witnesses said there was some disputes, but I mean, everybody
has
has
that.
disputes, right? So I mean, I can see why they would target him to start off with, but I think they probably took it too far.
Well, so if you watch any of the crime shows, you realize they always start with the closest to the victim.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be the husband, and then brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, uncles. They're going to kind of work their way out. Now, with Kim Thomas, it was essentially just her husband, and by all accounts, they were happily married. They had an infant child, so it wasn't there didn't appear to be any problems with the marriage. So they focus on him. This is where I think the first big misstep with the police is. And I say misstep because, hindsight's always 20/20, as my mom said. But looking back in the 90s, especially 1990, coming out of the 80s, most crimes like this would have been committed by the husband.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sort of the standard issue training.
Textbook.
Yes. And it was, this was a very violent act. Okay, so this appeared to be a crime of passion because most violent attacks like this are coming from a place of passion. It must be the husband. Now, that is a good place to start, and that is likely where all detectives would start. If I was a detective, that's exactly where I would start. The problem is there was not one piece of evidence that they could produce that ever indicated he had anything to do with this.
But they had DNA.
Not his.
But not back then. They couldn't test
They couldn't
it.
test
They
DNA
couldn't
back then.
test it. I jumped ahead.
Okay, well, I have a question.
You did. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
So, staying in the crime scene, I have a question.
Okay.
So that they accused the husband.
Yes.
Um,
Well, they accused him like
Of course they were accused
a
of
year later. I mean,
think
it wasn't
about
like that day.
So
well,
think about it. Somebody's dead. It's the wife. There's no forced entry,
right.
right? Some normal handyman, the other people said is in there, right? The baby is comfortable and unharmed, right? Your mind, if you think in the 90s when they don't have all this forensic DNA stuff, you're going to go straight to the husband. The husband did it.
Well, that's where
The
you
husband
start.
did it.
That's
But-
where you start, but there's no
Or that-
evidence.
My question
That
is,
husband or that husband did it. Yeah, the other one.
blame it on a black man. But my question is this. Was there a problem with his alibi if he was a doctor and he was at the hospital all day? Could they not tell about a supposed time of death? Could he have done it?
There were no reports of that were published that told about what he did right before the murder. So I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
I was just wondering why they couldn't clear
The details, there was not a lot released about
There's
this.
a lot of limited. It was very limited.
I think that's partly, well,
They talked
that's
about
part of the problem you're talking about. With
it's part of the problem, and we'll talk about that in a minute because in about 7 years that's going to come to light. But in this case, they focused on the husband, and there does not appear to be any evidence at all. No weapon, no blood on him, no blood on his clothing, nothing in his car. I mean, there doesn't appear to be anything that ties him to this.
Right. Well, you had mentioned earlier too about the handyman
Right.
that they looked at. Tell them why he was even a suspect.
He had done work in the neighborhood, and he had done work in their house shortly before the murder, a month or so before the murder. So it's not like he wasn't known around the neighborhood, kind of,
I
but
thought he was knocking on doors asking for
he was. I mean, but that's common.
Okay.
He had done work in the neighborhood before.
But
he
that
had work.
day,
He had worked for them though.
He had
was
worked- he had done
their
some work for them.
handyman.
but wasn't he spotted that day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get to. Okay.
Yeah. So I think at this point you have to look. So let me ask this: you guys are detectives. Just act harder. So you think the husband did it, but you can find no evidence. What do you do?
You have
Logic.
to solve a case, so therefore you just pin it on the husband.
No.
Keep pushing that.
No.
So you pin it on the husband. In the 1990s, they had to solve a case and move on because they were already had 1,000 of them. So they're like the most likely person.
Well, I'll tell you what you don't do in the 90s. You don't go to Taco Bell.
I mean, seriously, I think that's where we're getting at. Like,
It's
what
not by
do you do?
Eastland.
It's like they're probably like new detectives and stuff, and like textbook. Oh my god, the husband did it.
But you have to be taught follow the evidence.
Right.
I mean that's what you always
That's what
do.
I was
You
asking.
follow the evidence.
The first thing I would do is I would want to know: did he have an alibi? Was he at the hospital
Right.
all day long? Was there any kind of a
Let's assume for some reason that his alibi may not have been as firm as
Okay.
I was at work in surgery doing something.
Okay,
Maybe he was at dinner with a client. Maybe he was.
but they didn't find the murder weapon.
They didn't find the murder weapon.
I mean, they had nothing to hold him.
No, I mean there were no fingerprints on the handcuffs that match his. There was nothing.
Were there fingerprints on the handcuff?
I don't know.
Oh,
But if there were, they couldn't match him. So the question has to be, why would you then, to Ellis's misguided point, continue to go down the path and drive it that it's the husband?
I'm misguided. This one.
He is. We'll talk about that why in a minute.
okay. I'm sorry. Question. This was in the 90s.
1990.
I'm not being funny. I'm being serious. Can you just go to the store and buy handcuffs? I thought that was only like something that was issued to the police department or something.
You could. You still can. They're not police issued handcuffs.
And they don't say what
They're
type
enough. Yeah, I mean, you've got some with keys that's enough to, I mean, think S&M. I mean,
Yes,
let's go look in your.
Those are usually not.
Does yours not have a key?
Mine are official police handcuffs.
Okay, let's not open that can of
Hey,
worms.
I had a life in the 90s.
Move on from that one.
I have a police nightstick too. Woo-woo.
So you're sitting there and you have no evidence. Now, personally, I find it difficult for me to go after the husband. Now, I could see saying let's really focus on the husband, but they focus to eliminate, right? You start with who's closest and you do what you can to eliminate them.
I mean,
but you also
they cleared him.
The husband cooperated. He did.
let's not get ahead of ourselves. Hang on.
Still jumping. I'm sorry. I keep jumping.
Ellis, 1990.
Yeah, but he cooperated.
He cooperated. Now, so let's talk about why because Ellis has already letting the cats out of the bag.
I'm sorry.
Let's talk
I thought
about-
you were going that way.
Let's talk about why they
a
arrested him.
traveler.
I know, right? We've already talked about this, and I'm sorry, I've got all kinds of data here.
Well, Chris, we won't cover it all.
I know, but I really want to try to do this right.
I know you got a lot to say, and you're so excited about this one.
I am. So part of
Through it, he lived through it.
I did.
He was driving his Nissan Sentra.
Yes, actually, I was. I was driving
You were one
along.
too at one time. They used to bark.
No, that wasn't the Sentra.
What was that?
It was my Mitsubishi. It was green. It was lime green.
So here's essentially where they ended up.
Mint green, one line.
The husband, in their opinion, did not act as despondent as they thought he should. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you've watched crime shows, you see this a lot. Mm-hmm. When you're faced with something this tragic, there's no textbook response. You will respond however you do whatever you need to do to internalize that and grieve and.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's
It
fine.
was slipping.
That's all right. I just need to back up because now you're going to hear that click, click.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. It was like going down.
Well, can you not play this out because you're just gonna.
But now, can you hear me now?
Okay, and okay, and go.
And scene.
Okay, so the reason they focused on him, and I don't agree with this, but first they said he wasn't as despondent as he should have been, as they felt he should have been.
What do you mean by despondent?
Well, that's a really good question. Distraught. I think the biggest thing is they felt like he wasn't, on the floor in a fetal position, crying his eyes out, going, oh.
He's also a doctor.
But he's also a doctor.
That was my thing. I was like, well, he's a doctor. He probably sees death so much.
Well, keep in mind, he was a pediatric specialist. He's probably seen kids die. That requires a certain amount of resolve.
Okay, at the end of the day, though, yeah, he probably should have had some kind of emotional reaction to his wife being found like that. But when you look at the flip side of it, whoever made that comment, that was their opinion.
Right. But because he wasn't bawling, and now there's nothing to say that he wasn't distressed. It wasn't that he wasn't sad. There's nothing that says, oh no, he, went out the next day and went bowling, and none of that.
What he did after
it's just
the light was off of him.
He was not as despondent as they thought he should be.
Okay.
And he had opportunity because there was no forced entry. He had keys to the house. He had.
What was his opportunity?
That he had access to the house.
Okay. There's.
He was the husband.
But there was no motive.
They never came up with the motive. And we'll get to that in a little bit too. Y'all keep jumping ahead.
Well.
But no motive for him. And by the way, there was no life insurance on her. So there's no money. There's no financial motive. Everything says they had a happy family life. Does that mean they didn't argue once in a while? No. Guess what? Every married person's going to do that. Every married couple argues sometimes. You just do. But nothing that was major. There wasn't anything they could point at in their relationship or his life that would say there was no affair. There was nothing. Nothing.
So you asked us earlier, if we were detectives, what would we look at? I mean, one of the things that I think I would look at is their life. Do they have vacations coming up that were planned and booked? Do they have things on the calendar? Does this look like it was premeditated in any way? And from what I'm understanding, nothing.
Nothing.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and again, that's a great question, Greg. So anybody watching, love to hear your thoughts too. So you're dealing with the husband, and for whatever reason, and I'm not going to say that Ellis was completely misguided in his whole let's pin it on the husband, but you're looking at the husband, there's no evidence. What would you do next? I would love to hear people's reaction to that. So let's continue on. So let's move on a little bit. So a year later, he's charged. Okay? He's arrested and charged with the murder.
Who is he?
The husband.
Dr. Freeland, the husband. Sorry.
Do we know what he was arrested on, what grounds? I know murder of his wife, but I'm talking about what happened where they triggered the arrest?
I just told you, they felt like he wasn't as despondent as he should have. He had the opportunity.
So there was no
Physical
actual evidence.
No actual evidence. Which,
hold on. So.
Stop time traveling.
No. We're at the arrest. So. Let's talk about this. Do we feel like in that situation, they were, as Ellis had mentioned before, I got all these murders and crimes, I've got to solve them. Do we feel like maybe the police at that time felt pressured to make an arrest and that prompted that?
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second.
She was a socialite. I mean, I won't say socialite, but she was a
That's where I was going.
So she was like in the limelight in Cotswold and a doctor's
Right.
wife and doing all these great things.
And if you lived in Charlotte in the 90s, you know Cotswold. And
So there's probably a lot of
nice
pressure
area.
from people that knew her.
High affluent influence.
It was a prominent doctor, a prominent woman's advocate there. And I think you had because Cotswold's adjacent to South Park. So when you look at it, that's where the money is in Charlotte.
Well, that would be where the old money was.
Yes.
The rooted money in Charlotte would be in that area. Like it's always been an upscale area.
Right.
When you look through Charlotte, like it's upscale. You had to have a little bit there. It wasn't questionable, and they weren't like low income, or they never like generationed up. It's always been like affluent, high income.
Right. But let's go back to the Taco Bell killer for a second, because we were talking about 1993 with the Taco Bell killer and how the police sort of just didn't really jump into their cases, their murders, because they were sort of the population that could be easily sort of ignored. Because back in the 90s, Charlotte was 60, 70% white. This fit that 60 to 70% demographic. This would be where the pressure would come in. We've got a white person, a prominent white person that has been murdered in a prominent neighborhood. We need to solve it.
Right. So to your point, back then, there wasn't a lot of pressure to solve the Taco Bell killer there was probably to solve this murder.
I would say there would be more pressure to solve this than that.
Okay.
If they had to prioritize.
You make a valid point.
Well, I'm just saying, as you said in the last episode, there was only 7 of them, so they were shorthanded. They're going to have to prioritize. Who are they going to prioritize? This or?
Well, let's get back to the arrest. I don't want to hear about
that. He was arrested. And let me go through the evidence real quick again, because they found blood evidence, handcuffs, rug with biologic material, pubic hairs, and sign of a struggle. That was all they had. Now, the pubic hair, by the way, didn't seem to match the husband's, but that didn't seem to matter. And again, no DNA. We didn't have DNA testing in 1990. So all they're doing is looking through microscopes, and they might be able to type the blood, but I mean, let's face it, that's not going to get you much of anything. So they arrest the husband, and I think 6 or 8 months later, they drop the charges.
Why did they drop the charges?
Because they didn't have any evidence.
They didn't have any evidence.
It didn't even go to trial.
Was he held in jail?
Yes. But
wow.
Now he may have been bonded out.
What did that do to
he was
his
arrested.
career?
Again,
I don't know.
Very limited information.
Again, we're limited to the information that's available publicly, Freedom of Information Act. A lot of these details are not out there.
I was trying to find it all.
Yeah, I found a lot, but it took a lot of digging, and I still don't have all the answers. But hold that question, because I think that comes into play really, really soon.
Okay.
So he is released. 1997, Dr. Friedland files a civil lawsuit against Marion Gales. Remember Marion Gales? He was the handyman.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Friedland files a civil lawsuit for wrongful death
for $8 million.
For $8 million.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
and won.
Now, people are going to say, well, hang on. But if he could win that,
right?
Why couldn't the police arrest him? 2 different levels of evidentiary requirements.
Do we know what prompted him to sue him?
Because he knew that the guy did it.
So I think part of it was they were focusing on him, and he was like, I didn't do this, so I think he wanted to get it off of him.
I think that the thing is like with a like a crime, if you're like charged, it's like reasonable doubt, right? But when you go civilly, it's like
civilly is without a doubt.
With
civil is the preponderance. And so when you think about the preponderance of the evidence, the jury had to only find that the evidence suggests that he was 51% or more possibly liable.
Like more than likely.
More than 50%, yes.
The handyman had a criminal past, right?
Did I say that?
But let's talk about, and this gets me to the next big thing about this. So remember we started the case and I said there were some missteps by the police.
Yes.
This is where one of them comes out.
Okay.
So in the mid-1990s, the Charlotte Observer ran a 4-part series on the Kim Thomas murder. Guess what they found and reported?
They found and report.
That there's a lot of information the police had that they never released. Friedland had never seen. There was information in there his lawyers had never seen. There was information in there only the police knew.
Then the attorneys and
Friedland and his attorney had said,
have it.
now we've got something to jump into. And so with the police not arresting Gales, they went into civil court.
And they're like,
So that prompted the lawsuit. Okay.
That prompted the
that's
lawsuit.
we have all this information that they've now shared.
Right.
We can now use that. They don't want to use it criminally against him. Then
Right.
guess what we could do? We can go take it to civil court
Right. Now, there was a lot of stuff in there. There were reports. So
or suit.
remember at the beginning, we said somebody saw him with what appeared to be blood on his shirt. That was never shared with Friedland or the lawyers. They said that
Wasn't that circumstantial?
you're talking civil, not criminal.
Okay.
They said that he was known to be in the neighborhood that day. That was never really shared with Freeland or his attorneys. That Gales had a criminal history was never shared with Freeland or his attorneys. One of the big things was there was a jailhouse confession reported by an inmate that Gales said he did the crime. So there was several things that were not shared with Freeland's attorney. So they jumped on that. They jumped into court, and yes, they won their $8 million lawsuit. Right.
And we're talking about Dr. Freeland.
Dr. Freeland.
Can we call him Dr. Freeland?
That's $20.
Because when you keep saying Freeland and the Gale, me personally am getting the two mixed up because of the way you keep talking about
Okay. So Dr. Friedland
it. Thank you.
won his lawsuit for $8 million. Now, guess how much he collected of that?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I mean, look who he
Like
sued.
$20.
He sued a handyman. What's he going to get?
Now,
His rent?
this is sort of where it gets a little bit interesting. So, the case goes cold after Dr. Friedland is released. Honestly, we really don't hear anything about Kim Thomas's death until this year.
You know what we do here?
What?
I hear a commercial coming.
Yeah, you know what? I hear a commercial coming too.
Yeah. Time for commercial break.
Welcome to Arise Entertainment, your gateway to unforgettable play. Board games that spark joyful chaos. Tarot that whispers truth and lights your path. Trivia that unleashes mythic mayhem. This is what epic feels like. Shop now at Arise Entertainment. Arise Entertainment. We set the stage. You steal the show.
We're back.
We're back.
Okay. So let's go back to the civil case because as I said, there were things that were not shared. It wasn't until the mid-90s until Dr. Friedland found out that, hey, there's all this other stuff.
Wow.
He's got this extensive criminal background. He was in the neighborhood. They saw blood on his shirt. By the way, when he was incarcerated on some unknown crime, he also confessed to killing her. Nobody ever so now, let's talk about why that doesn't play in the criminal.
Why does not play in the criminal?
First of all, jailhouse confessions are rarely ever seen as
Credible.
Incredible.
Second is, the only time that changes is if they, get some sort of voice evidence where the guy said, yeah, I did it. Or they share details that are unknown.
Unknown, yeah, absolutely.
None of the details he shared were things that had not been in the paper.
Right.
But let me just interject for 1 second. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to be a police officer and say, this handyman was in the neighborhood, neighbors spotted him, he's got a criminal past,
And he's
he's
black.
done handyman work in the house, but we're not even going to consider looking into him.
And he black.
But during the time they were accusing the husband.
Well, I think he and her family were sort of continuing to push for that. So, Ellis, I think you brought it up that in 2010, CMPD reopened the case.
I mean, I don't care if he was pink or orange. The fact is, that's
It was questionable.
Again.
Questionable, yes.
And that's what I said.
no wonder
Hindsight's
Taco
20
Bell guy moved to Charlotte.
No,
He's like, I can get away with anything.
Well, keep in mind, and we learned this in the last episode, CMPD became an entity in 93. So before 1993, it was just Charlotte PD. Charlotte PD, I lived here, did not have a great reputation. So I am not completely surprised by this, but you would think.
But we're not going to go down that trail.
No.
They did their best job in reference.
We hope they did their best
that
job.
They had available to them.
But I would say in this case, I have to question that. They focused on the husband for years and years and years.
For 1 year. And they let him go.
They didn't even arrest him for a year.
1990 to 1994, that's years.
But they focused, but he wasn't arrested. He only was arrested for like the year, you just said.
Yeah, but when he was released, they still continued to focus on him because he was their suspect. That was what they were focused on.
Because he was a textbook.
Right.
But how horrible is that? Okay, look, we know now he didn't do it.
Well,
Okay, no, we know he didn't do it.
Spoiler alert, he didn't do it.
We know he didn't do it. Why we keep talking about this handyman? Imagine coming home from work, finding your significant other almost just dismembered, dead, raped, handcuffed.
We going into the future already again.
Going back to that day, put yourself into his mindset. Now, not only
Whose
did you
mindset, Dr.
the
Freeman?
doctor. Not only did you come home and all this happened, now you're being accused of doing it for the next 4 years. Not only you also get arrested, you get put in jail. Well, I would remark about they did all they could do. I don't think they did.
I'm not so
They
sure.
did all that they could do.
I think they did all they
resources
wanted to
that they had available to them.
I don't think so. What was it in 2010?
So CMPD reopened the case. And that's why we're talking about the handyman.
No.
Why are we talking about the handyman?
In 1995, they already knew he had confessed during a period of incarceration. They already knew that. He had confessed.
They should have never continued this case at that time.
Right.
I know that they were strapped and they had a different department hierarchies, or there's something to deal with.
Ellis, are you sleeping with somebody in the police department?
I'm like, Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry. Maybe my level
If you would have been that doctor,
expectations just
you would be like,
higher, but
they botched this entire investigation.
okay. So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Ellis. Hang on. Let me ask
Well,
you
they
this.
certainly didn't solve it.
They
Hang
didn't
on.
solve it.
Let me ask you this, Ellis. So you come home and you find your husband dead, slaughtered, cut up, almost dismembered. The police hound you, and you know you didn't do it, but they hound you for years. They arrest you. They perp walk you. It's all in the papers. You were arrested for this. Then they release you because there's no evidence. And then you find out that, wait a second, Joe Smo over here a year ago confessed and you're not doing anything about it. Would you say,
You have all this evidence on this guy that was in my house?
Would you think the police did their best to get the right person if it had been you that had been wronged?
I'm sure that they used their resources and invested.
Okay. Alice, I don't know who you're trying to cover for, but I call it the way I see it.
I was just saying, they
I have no doubt. I have no doubt that they probably tried the best they could, but their training was bad. Their expectations were bad. Their guidance was bad.
There's a reason
Their assumptions were bad.
They were going by textbook, but I'm sure that they only knew that.
They only knew that.
They only knew that. That's what I'm saying.
But
they knew that better. If they didn't know no better, and that's all they knew. All they knew was some big dark doctor's wife has died. We need to pin something on it, and this is what they tell us to do, and we need to do it.
But
I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do, but they should.
Hang on. Hold on. Let me stop you right there. So you think that it's okay that the police department convicted this guy or arrested this guy because they were told to do it, not because they could literally follow the evidence? And you think that's right, that they did all they could do?
I'm going to ask
that's what you're saying.
similar question.
Followed the evidence.
No, they did not.
They could.
They did not.
They did not.
You just said
They did.
They were told to do this, and they did it.
Hang on.
because they knew
They
no
did
better.
not follow the evidence because the evidence pointed away from Friedland.
From the best
No,
of their knowledge.
no.
That is your opinion. And
I
I'm
don't know why
sorry,
you have that
But
opinion.
if this was Rotten Tomatoes, you would be red right now.
This is, I have to challenge this because at the end of the day, nothing that they did was substantiated by any evidence. There was no support of it.
But
Nothing.
what we know today in reference to how
Then there was no
Then
evidence then.
they did not have the full resources to do a full investigation like we do these days.
You know what? I'm not a
You know what?
They
No.
were thinking.
Mm.
They were working on
No.
what they had available.
If I were doing that and
Was it
somebody
good? No, it was not good. I'm not saying it's good, so stop attacking me. I'm just making a point.
no,
that
you're
they didn't know.
you're giving them an out, and I'm
I'm
not.
not giving them an out.
Yes, you're saying they did the best they could.
They did the best they can
No,
with the resources.
I don't
How
think
do
they
you
did.
know that, Ellis?
I don't, and neither do you.
Well, how?
Oh, I did.
No,
Because
no.
I can look back on it and see what they had and know that, you know what, there was enough to question
Fabian,
this stuff.
you feel they did the best they could. You're saying they did the best they could. How do you know that? Because I don't think they did.
With what they had.
No.
They're
They,
not out.
okay, let's stop for a
That's what
second.
I said. I
Let's
said
stop
that's-
for a second.
I said that's what
By
they,
1995,
What do you think, audience?
Yeah, I
Do
know.
you think they did the best that they could?
by
what they had.
Please help us
Stop
because
for-
maybe we need clarification.
hang on, stop for a second. By 1995, 5 years after the murder, okay, they knew he was in the neighborhood. They knew that he had blood on his shirt. They knew he gave a criminal confession behind bars, and they knew that he had this other criminal history. They knew that Dr. Friedland did not match any of the fucking shit that they had. You're going to sit right there and tell me that they did the best they could. No, they did not.
With what they
Getting
had.
that hot up in here. Do not ever represent me in court.
No.
Okay?
And
Because
don't ever come in and say,
I did
you
the
know-
best I could. He guilty.
my boss said this and that's not true.
This is the easy
They
way
did the
out.
best they could, I'm sure. They reopened the case in 2010, but there's really not anything that was on it until in
Do tell us.
2008, guess who ends up back behind bars?
Gales.
Why does he end up back behind bars?
Because he killed someone
Yes, he did.
behind the house in one of those neighborhoods that we talked about earlier,
Oakdale.
where you don't want to be at.
Oakdale.
You want to know
Um,
why that happened? Because he is not a good guy.
No.
But I'm sure he did his best
Hold on.
with what he had.
You want to know why that happened? Because the
Oh.
police department didn't do all that they should have done in the first place.
But they found him on this one, right?
Well, they arrested him and he pleaded guilty to manslaughter.
In 2009.
Yes. And I think
Why?
that's part of why it reopened in
They
2010.
got the right guy. And maybe they were a little bit better now.
because he confessed.
Because they're
Because he
a little bit better.
confessed.
No,
That's right. If he wouldn't
they
have
got him
confessed,
in 20.
they probably would have blamed it
They
on
got him 20.
No.
They got him in 2008. Wow.
Guess why?
Several years later,
But if they would have
No,
done
hang
their
on.
due diligence,
from this
they
case,
could have saved
Hang on.
that woman's
Why did they get them in 2008? There was a big difference. They had DNA. By 2008, DNA was well enough that they could take material off the body and run it. And that's how they got him. And he had already been in prison or
right.
incarcerated. So
Then what did that do? That then gave them the information they then needed. Oh, am I going future?
So the next year 2010, they reopened the case. They did do some DNA tests on some of the material, but nothing ever came back. You had degradation. There was some mixed DNA in there. So you had some where it was the perpetrator and Kim's. And so we didn't have, even in early 2000s, the ability to kind of see through that. But in 2024, 2025, new DNA testing came out. Probabilistic genotyping.
They started testing all the older tape cases as well.
Right. So I want to talk about probabilistic
cold case.
genotyping. So that
that
talks real fast, I know. Probabilistic genotyping. It uses mathematical algorithms to analyze complex, low quality, or mixed DNA samples, which is exactly what they had.
Right, because if you think low quality, they got this in 1990, so it's been sitting in some box, in some bag somewhere.
Right.
So basically, the DNA profiles and stuff have like deteriorated.
And also, we had the ability now to sort of multiply DNA, so we could take a small bit and extrapolate and multiply that and create larger.
What do you mean by extrapolate?
They could take small amounts of DNA, pull it, and then multiply it to create enough to actually do some testing.
I know what it means. I just wanted him to explain it for the people that may not.
If you're watching this podcast, you're either in it for the humor or you actually follow a lot of this stuff anyway, so you probably already know.
But if you're still watching, then you know what? We must be doing something right. So
I just like
okay. So that brings us to current day. So this is the reason I chose this case. This is the reason I am excited and why I've done all of this research, because this to me is a full circle moment. What happened in February of this year, February 2026?
Well, first of all,
Valentine's Day.
the 2025, that guy got arrested, Gales, for that murder because he confessed. They got the right guy, and he was serving a 20-year sentence. He got out of jail in 2025.
Yes,
like at the end of the year, and then in February 2026, they did all their testing and whatnot, and then boom, they arrested him.
So in February of 2026, they go through all of the DNA testing again with this new DNA test, and it returns whose name? Marion Gales. Now remember, Marion Gales was the first suspect in 1990. So kudos to the police for identifying him early, but I'm still holding them accountable for the fact that they dropped him and picked up the wrong person and followed him for years. Mm-hmm. But now, 36 years later, we can get some justice for Kim Thomas. So here's the thing. We still don't know the motive. We can only assume it's something sexual because there was a sexual crime there, but we do not know for sure. We have no idea what happened, no motive, nothing. But we know we have the right person because DNA is there. DNA placed him on her body at the time of death. So we'll keep you updated on this, and we'll do updates. But I do want to come in and do some closing statements. So, Ellis, do you want to lead off?
And we don't know too much about this guy, the whole motive and what was going on. We can't really say he was a monster or he was bred or, what led him to this. He's not a serial killer. Well, I mean, he did 2. I think you have to do like 3 or more to be a serial killer. But we just don't know too much about it. So, and then there's not like a lot of information. And like we we're talking about, there's like limited details that are released. It might make you think a lot differently if you had like some of those good details that we generally have. So we can't say, we really don't know, even though we do know, right, what happened. We do know that he was there, and I believe that he did it, right? I mean, the evidence shows he did it. But like, who is that person? Can we get into the mind of that killer, or that murderer at this time? We really can't. But it's really interesting, I guess, because I mean, I lived in Cotswold myself for a very long time. So it's interesting to know the whole neighborhood I had this big old murder, and I live in Charlotte. So it's very intriguing to me. So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. I'll probably follow it a whole lot more.
That's awesome. So, Greg, closing statements?
Sorry, I rambled.
I feel that you shouldn't play with people's lives. And based on the information that we've uncovered today and went through today, if we focus back on how that investigation unfolded, it was botched. They just destroyed a doctor's reputation and his life. He lost his wife, went through a whole lot of unnecessary torment during this, in addition to losing his wife. Another young lady was killed years later by the same man that they should have followed the evidence on to begin with. So that was another senseless murder, another senseless life lost, again, for no good apparent reason. Then they just didn't follow the evidence. Blame it on whatever you want, training or doing what they were told to do, whatever. You're playing with people's lives. So this guy, a lot of different criminal history. We've talked about drug dealing. We've talked about 2 different murders. We've talked about rape. At the end of the day, they finally got it right and got him off the street. But look at what a devastating trail has been left in his wake. That was unnecessary. And it just pains me to think, as we sit here and talk about things like this, that even in today's time, people are quick to point fingers at other people, people are quick to make assumptions, and people are quick to justify these actions. For what? Because they got a case to close? They're under pressure? People's opinions? You need to follow the facts.
Thanks. Okay, so my closing statement. So, first of all, I am thrilled beyond any belief that we actually find some justice for Kim Thomas. That case has stuck with me over the years. I lost track of it when I was in California living, but it's always stuck with me because it was just one of those unnecessary crimes that occurred in a town that I love, and we just could not crack the code on it. I will say that I do think Charlotte Mecklenburg did not do their due diligence well enough, and they didn't follow the evidence well enough, regardless of what other people might say. But I'm happy that we got justice for Kim. I hate that we also saw another young lady lose her life. But I think at the end of the day, we talked last episode about the whole death penalty thing and the red tape and all of the mire that the death penalty. And I think this case actually kind of proves a little bit of that out. What if he would have been convicted? What if, for whatever reason, they were able to get a conviction on Dr. Friedland back in, that would have been absolutely wrong. And that would have been one of hundreds of cases. So sometimes bad things happen to good people. I do think the police rushed to judgment. I think they wanted to get this off their books. I think they wanted to tell the neighborhoods that they cleaned it up. We reacted. We got the guy, but they just couldn't. And in doing that, they lost their way. At the end of the day, the right guy's behind bars. And I have no doubt that this time Marion Gales will spend the rest of his life in jail. We'll keep you guys updated on the updates as this case unfolds. Keep your local news if you're in the Carolinas. Keep an eye on it. This is really one of those cases that resonates deeply with me. And as you can see, I am now out of wine, so we have reached the end of our time.
No more wine?
Thanks for joining. Bye.
Until later. Bye, guys.